My greetings to everyone. I am Professor Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of entrepreneurship and venture planning, today we are going to discuss on the business environment, the analysis and diagnosis. Now, as far as the meaning of the business environment is concerned, the business environment refers to the totality of internal and external forces that affect the operations, performance and the growth of an enterprise. Now, these forces may include economic conditions, market trends, legal regulations, technological advancements, socio-cultural dynamics and the political stability. Now, as stated by Richmond and Copin, the environmental factors or the constraints are largely, if not totally, the external and beyond the control of an individual, the industrial enterprises and their management. Now, let us see the classification of the business environment. Business environment can broadly be classified into internal environment and external environment. And when you talk about the external environment, we have two types, micro environment and macro environment. Now, economic environment and non-economic environment is also vital and pertinent to mention and explain. So, we will be dwelling into these types of business environment one by one. Let us first explore on what is internal environment. The internal environment includes the controllable factors within the organization. Now, these factors reflect the strengths and the capabilities of an organization. Now, let us see the components of the internal environment. Out of this, the first we are going to discuss is the financial resources. The funds allocated for the business activities, investments, research and development, etc. Let us take an illustration. The Reliance Industries' strong financial resources help it invest in the sectors like telecom, like geo, retail and energy. Now, there are some physical resources also like infrastructure such as the building, machinery, tool, etc. So, there is a very important company called Tata Motors manufacturing plants with advanced robotics enhance the production efficiency. Now, what are human resources? That is, we talk about the employees, their skill sets, the competencies and the morale. For example, a very high-tech company called Infosys is known for its skilled workforce and the training programs at Mysore camps. Now, the next internal aspects and the internal resources what we talk about is the technological resources, the technical know-how and the innovation capabilities. Let us take an example of Apple. Apple innovation in the product design and software development differentiates its brand globally. Now, coming on to what is external environment. External environment includes the uncontrollable factors that exist outside the organization and significantly influence the business decisions. It is further divided into micro environment and the macro environment. So, let us first explain what is a micro environment. Now, these are very close, direct external forces that affect a business daily operations. Now, there are certain components of the micro environment like customers. The business must understand the customer needs and preferences. For example, Maruti Suzuki introduced the affordable hatchbacks for the middle class Indian consumer. Then we have the suppliers. The suppliers provide the essential inputs and the business depend on them for the cost and also the quality. Now, for example, the automakers like Toyota, they maintain the multiple supplies to ensure a smooth production in case of disruptions. There are competitors. The strategies of the competitors affect the market share and the pricing. For example, the concept of geo low price strategy disrupted the telecom market and forced the competitors like Airtel and the Vodafone to revise their plans. Now we have another concept of public. The media, the community groups, the financial institutions and the NGOs, they affect the public perception. For example, there is a concept of public backslash against the Nestle Maggi noodles in the way back in the year 2015 due to the safety concerns impacted their sales drastically. Now there are market intermediaries, we have the distribution channels, the logistic partners, the marketing agencies. For example, Amazon robust delivery network and logistic partners, they ensure to have a prompt delivery of the services across India. The second type of environment what we talk about is a macro environment. Now these are broad external forces that influence the business decisions on a wider scale. We have economic environment. Now this includes the factors like inflation, interest rates, GDP, that is gross domestic product, employment, financial and the monetary policies, etc. Now let's take an example. During the COVID-19, GDP contraction led many business to cut the cost and change the marketing strategies. Now another example, the Indian government Make in India campaign, it encourages the manufacturing sector growth and the job creation. Then we have the non-economic environment, that is the political legal environment. It includes the laws, regulations, policies influencing the business operations. Let's take an example. The introduction of GST in India simplified the indirect taxes structure and changed the pricing strategies. Another example, the Security Exchange Board of India regulations ensure a transparency in the stock market transactions for the companies like HDFC and ICICI. Then we have a concept of socio-cultural environment. It includes the societal values, the lifestyles, the traditions, the beliefs, the literacy rates, etc. Let's take an example here. The growth of e-commerce and the digital payment adoption is partly due to the changing lifestyles and the youth population preferences in India. The technological environment. The technology affects the production, the communication and the distribution. Let's take an example of Ola and Uber. They leveraged the mobile app technology to disrupt the traditional taxi service market. Now, let us talk about the demographic environment. The demographics such as the population, size, age, structure, literacy, the urbanization, etc. They impact the demand and the labor availability. Like for example, India's large youth population drives the demand for the education technology, the platforms like Byju's and Unacademy. Then we have a concept of natural environment. The natural resources like land, water, forest, air quality, etc. impact the sustainability and the production. For example, Coca-Cola and the Pepsi, they face the backslash in some Indian states over the excessive groundwater extraction. Then we have a concept called international environment. Now when you talk about the international environment, it includes the cross-border trade agreements, the multinational corporation operations and the global competition. Like for example, India's participation in WTO impacts the import-export rules. For example, the Indian IT companies like Tata Consultancy Services, Infosys operate in the US, UK and the European Union markets. They are influenced by the foreign policies and the visa regulations. Now coming on to the relationship between the environment and the business. The business environment interface refers to the dynamic and the continuous interaction between the business and its surrounding environment. Now, this interaction influences the business operations, decision growth and sustainability. So, it is a two-way relationship including the inputs, feedback, influence and adaptation. Now, when you talk about the relationship between the environment and the business, there are certain points which we would like to discuss here, out of which the first is economic environment and the business decisions. The economic environment, it includes the factors like inflation, interest rates, consumer income levels, fiscal policies, and the business cycles. For example, boom and recession. Let's take an illustration here. During a recession, the consumers reduce the spending, which leads to the lower demand for the products. The business may respond by cutting down the production, reducing the cost, or offering the discounts. Now, let us have a case in point: automobile industry. Automobile industry often sees the reduced car sales during the economic slowdowns. In response, the companies like Maruti Suzuki or a Hyundai offers the price cuts, EMI schemes or launch the budget-friendly models. Then we have the microenvironment and the stakeholder influence. The microenvironment comprises internal and the close external stakeholders, employees, suppliers, stakeholders, customers and the competitors. Like for example, employees may demand a better working conditions and higher wages. If the company fails to meet these expectations, it may face the strikes or high attrition rates. Now, there are suppliers which may increase the raw material prices, affecting the production cost. The business then must renegotiate the contracts or seek alternative suppliers. The shareholder expects the higher dividends and the returns. There are poor performance which may lower the share prices and reduce the investor confidence. Now, the real life cases like Jet Airways India, they struggled with the salary issues, the supplier payment and the stakeholder dissatisfaction, leading to its financial collapse. Now, there is a flow of information between the business and the environment. The business constantly receive and exchange the information with the environment. There are inputs from the environment like information on the consumer preferences, new technologies, the government regulations, the competitor strategies, etc. Now, there are outputs to the environment. The business publish the financial reports, advertisements, sustainability reports, etc. and to communicate with the environment. For example, a FMCG company like Hindustan Unilever, they tracks the consumer trends for the eco-friendly products and launches the products like paper-based soap boxes or refillable bottles. In return, they release the corporate social responsibility and the sustainability reports to inform the stakeholders of their environmental initiatives. Next we have is the conversation process and the feedback mechanisms. The business process environmental inputs the raw material, labor, capital, technology into the outputs, that is the goods, services, and it also receives the feedback from the environment. Let us take some examples here. The IT companies like Infosys, it take the skilled labor, the software tools and the market trends as the inputs and deliver the tech solutions as outputs. The client feedback helps improve the service delivery and the software design. Now, the feedback allows the business to modify the products or the services, upgrade the technology and improve the quality standards and also enhance the customer satisfaction. Then we have a concept of evolving expectations and the new equilibrium. There is a continuous interaction which leads to the changing expectations from the environment. The consumers now demand ethical business practices, sustainability, gender diversity, and also the transparency. Now, we will take an illustration to expand on this. The consumers prefer the companies that reduce the carbon footprints, for example, Tata Steel using the green technologies. From the business expect a stable policy framework, consistent raw material supply, fair trade laws, and the tax benefits. Now, we will take an example here. The textile companies in India demand incentives from the government under PLI, that is the production linked incentive schemes. This has actually led to some new business environmental equilibrium. The business became more socially responsible, ethically sound, and technologically advanced. The environment becomes more supportive, offering the business opportunities and the growth potential. So, we can say when you talk about the relationship between the environment and the business environment relationship is not static. It is cyclical, it is adaptive interface. And both the business and the environment evolve, they influence each other. The business that understand this interface well and adapt quickly to the changes in their environment are the ones that survive and that thrive. Now, let us do a new concept of what is environmental analysis, what is the meaning and also its significance. The environment analysis refers to the systematic process of identifying, monitoring and evaluating the external and the internal factors that affect an organization's functioning and also the decision making. The goal is to understand the opportunities and the threats that arise from the business environment. Now, there are some key elements of the environmental analysis. The first is breaking down the environment into the components like economic, political, technological, social, legal, and ecological factors. Now, understanding how these components affect the business operations plans and also the performance. Now, moving forward, recognizing the trends and the patterns to predict the future changes and prepare accordingly. Now, there are certain types of environment in analysis. Internal environment, which includes the company's own resources like employees, capital, infrastructure, corporate culture, etc. And the external environment, which includes the microenvironment, that is the customer, supplier, competitors, intermediaries, etc. The macro environment like political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental, that is we call it as pestle analysis. Now, we will take an example of environmental analysis. There is a smartphone the company performs the technological environment analysis and identifies a rapid shift towards 5G technology and AI integrated features. As a result, it decides to invest more in research and development and innovation to stay competitive. The environmental diagnosis, meaning and its importance. Now, when you talk about the environmental diagnosis, it goes a step further than analysis. It investigates and interprets how the identified environmental factors actually impact the business strategies, the goals and the performance. It focuses on filtering the relevant data and understanding which factors are critical to the business success. Now, there are certain key features of environmental diagnosis. The evaluating the intensity and the significance of the environmental factors, identifying the challenges and the barriers arising from the environment, assessing the implications of external changes on the business plans and the strategy, prioritizing the threats and the opportunities based on their potential impact. Now, we'll take an example here of the environmental diagnosis. Continuing the smartphone company example, after identifying the 5G trend analysis, the company does a diagnosis to evaluate whether its existing production capacity, the supply chain, and the skilled manpower are capable of supporting a shift to 5G technology. It finds the gaps and restructures the operations and the partnership accordingly. There is a combined approach and we call it as environment analysis and the diagnosis. Both the analysis and the diagnosis are interconnected and essential in the strategic planning. While analysis helps in identifying the environmental variables, diagnosis interprets their relevance and effect on the business decisions. Now, let's take an example here, the retail industry. The environmental analysis, a retail chain observes a shift in the consumer behavior towards online shopping, that is social plus technological factors. Now, when you talk about the environment diagnosis, the company assesses whether its physical stores can sustain the profitability or needs to shift towards the omni-channel model or both online and the offline. It then reforms the strategies to enhance its digital presence and reduces the unprofitable physical outlets. Now, we move on with the benefits of environment analysis and also the diagnosis. It improves the forecasting and preparedness. It aligns the business strategies with the external realities. It enables the risk mitigation and the opportunity utilization. It helps in the strategic adaptability and the long-term planning. There is a scenario planning and also the benchmarking. So, we can conclude about this particular section that environment analysis and the diagnosis are internal and integral to the strategic decision making in any organization. While analysis helps in understanding the what and the where of environmental factors, the diagnosis provides the insight into how and to what extent they will affect the organization. So, together they ensure a better alignment of the business strategies with the changing environmental elements and also its dynamics. Now, there are definitely certain important factors which we have to see when the environmental analysis and the diagnosis is concerned, because as I said, it has been a very significant and a vital part of the strategic management. And of course, we have deeply discussed about the understanding part of it and what analysis really help us in understanding and what and where of the environmental factors. The diagnosis provides a very deep insight into how and definitely to what extent they will affect the organization. So, when you actually have to align better, when you have to work better with the business strategies, you have to have a framework under which you have to embed, you have to incorporate, you have to actually build the strategy with the changing dynamics of the environmental factors. Otherwise, we will not be able to have the best strategies and the decision making ever. So, we have to have a complete forecasting and preparedness because of the external and the internal environment. We have to actually keep ourselves updated with the opportunities which are coming our way and definitely reduce the risk factors. We have to have a very good adaptability as far as the long term planning is concerned, and this is how keeping all these factors in one frame, it ensures that we are able to have the best business strategies with the changing business environmental dynamics. Thank you so much.